Well, let's bring in Shai Franklin, a partner with Gotham Government Relations, a law firm based in the United States, and he joins me now live from New York. Shai, great to have you on the NewsHour. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Simon finished his package with Ilya Yashin, one of the strongest critics of the Kremlin. He's been jailed for 8 years. So let's start there. Is this the Kremlin sending out the strongest possible message of what will happen if you dare to stick your head above the parapet and indeed criticise their war in Ukraine?
That's certainly the intent. The effect is that now everybody in the world is talking about Ilya Yashin, who 12 hours ago probably wasn't on the front of people's lips or thoughts. So, and what it demonstrates is vulnerability and a lack of self-confidence by Putin. He can't tolerate to even have a few politicians speaking out against him. The court proceedings, they didn't even try to prove that what he said was disinformation. They didn't try to prove that the massacres in Bucha didn't happen. They didn't try to prove that he had malicious intent toward the Russian Federation. We see Putin before the cameras in Bishkek. The idea, who would have thought 20 years ago that going to Bishkek would be greater transparency and greater freedom of the press than in Moscow?
Well, I mean, Putin cracked down very swiftly after he went into Ukraine on free speech, on independent media, and indeed on critics of the Russian government. Are there any left within Russia that dare to speak their mind?
I think there are. We in the West haven't necessarily heard their names, and people are always coming out of the woodwork. There are 145 million Russians, and many of the ones who oppose Putin have left, but many of them have stayed. And at some point, people run out of patience, or they reach a point where they feel they have nothing left to lose, or it's their turn to stand up. We saw under the Soviet Union, despite the Stalinist crackdowns in the 1930s and then in the 1950s, there continued to be dissent. Maybe we didn't hear about it so much because there wasn't as much Twitter or TikTok, but there's no way that Putin can escape this. And the Russian people increasingly, eventually, are going to find out what's really going on. The more Putin insists that everything is going well in Ukraine, the more obvious it is that that's not the case. And there will be about half of the Russian people who support him no matter what, who hate Ukraine and feel that what he could just do if he could do the war better, then that would be good, if he could kill more Ukrainians. But half of the Russians don't. And that's not going to be enough.
And on the success or otherwise of the ongoing war, we heard today from Vladimir Putin accepting, perhaps for the first time, that they will need to find some sort of peace deal at some stage in the future. Now, of course, he qualified that, but is that the clearest admission yet from him that his war is not going as planned?
That is possible. I think there's multiple messages going out in the same sentence by Putin. The West is clearly supporting Ukraine against this invasion of Ukraine's sovereignty. Putin claims that you can't trust the West because the West violates its treaties. He's really gaslighting because it's the Russian Federation that has consistently violated treaties with respect to Ukraine, with respect to sovereignty, and going back to 2014 and going back to this February, plus the laws of war and war crimes. So he claims that Ukraine now isn't acting in its own interest. It's being compelled by the West. 6 months ago, a year ago, he was saying that he wants to negotiate only with the West. He doesn't want to negotiate directly with Ukraine or with Zelensky because he didn't recognize Ukraine as a separate country. Now he's shifted. He says that he should be dealing with Ukraine. If Ukraine could deal on its own without being forced by the West, then everything would be fine. He's really trolling the West. I've said this before on TRT, and I think that continues to be the case. We know that he has set up provisions to go to Venezuela with some of his key insiders as a possible backup. So once he has the lifeboat ready and provisioned, I think that is the clearest sign that he recognizes things aren't going well.
We always appreciate you coming on the program. Shai Franklin there joining us from New York. Appreciate that.